please hold him. He only sleeps in your arms." Matteo Rinaldi had never begged inside his own home. Yet that night, the Mafia boss stood in his son's nursery with 5-month-old Milo trembling against his chest, and desperation had stripped all authority from his voice. Still, Milo had cried until his body was exhausted, and every time Matteo touched him, the crying grew worse. Nora Whitaker had only come to deliver bread. She lowered the nursery lights, asked the armed men to step outside, and took Milo without promising anything. Within minutes, his fists opened. His breathing slowed. Then he fell asleep against the flour-dusted sleeve of a woman he had never met. But as Matteo reached for his son, Nora noticed the blue and gold wheat symbol stitched into the blanket. Her face changed. Matteo saw it. And he understood that the baker knew something about the wife who had disappeared. Before we go back to how this night began, tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe if you believe children can reveal what adults hide. Because the symbol on Milo's blanket was only the beginning. 3 months earlier, Isabel Rinaldi had walked out of the East Gate shortly before dawn and never returned. There had been no demand for money, no photograph sent to the family, and no body found. She had left her wedding ring in a bathroom drawer and a 6-word note beside Milo's crib. "He will be safer without me." Matteo had treated those words like an enemy statement. He questioned the gate guards, replaced the drivers, searched airports and private clinics, and sent men to every address Isabel had ever used. None of it brought her home. What he did not do was sit beside his son for longer than a few minutes. Every morning, Matteo entered the nursery in a charcoal suit and asked how much Milo had eaten, how long he had slept, and whether the physician had called. He never forgot a number. But when Milo cried, Matteo straightened both silver cuff links and called whoever was on duty. Each cold report gave Matteo facts he could control, while Milo's crying reminded him of everything he could not. "He settles faster for you," he would say. By the 2nd month, Milo had 3 caregivers during the day and 2 at night. Each brought a new song, blanket, or theory. The nursery grew brighter, busier, and louder. Celeste Rinaldi approved every change. At 64, Matteo's mother carried herself like a woman who had never been surprised in public. Her silver hair formed a neat bob, her burgundy dresses never creased, and every letter entering the estate crossed her desk. She claimed the arrangement protected Matteo's concentration. A council meeting was approaching. Several capos had begun asking whether Isabel's disappearance had distracted Matteo, and Celeste refused to let a crying child become another rumor about weakness inside the Rinaldi house. "Your father lost men the week our enemies learned he was grieving," she reminded Matteo. "People like us do not suffer in public." So Matteo suffered on the other side of the nursery door, where nobody could see him. Across town, Nora Whitaker's mornings began before 4. Her bakery was narrow, warm, and always dusted with flour. Nora moved between the counters with practiced speed, chestnut hair in a low knot, and a cream apron over her dark green dress. Customers remembered the beautiful plus-size baker for judging a loaf with one finger against its crust. Lately, that finger had also been testing a failing oven door. The old hinge no longer sealed properly. Heat escaped, the back trays browned too quickly, and the repair estimate sat beneath the register beside 3 payroll envelopes. The weekly order from the Rinaldi estate covered those wages. Losing it would mean deciding which employee went home first. Still, the first loaf Nora baked each morning was never sold. She brushed it with orange glaze, added a little cardamom, wrapped it in plain paper, and carried it 2 blocks to Willow Hearth before sunrise. The Women's Refuge had ordered bread from her years earlier, when Nora was caring for her sister's newborn during a difficult recovery. That contract had ended, but the first loaf remained. The shelter's blue door bore a small emblem, a blue stalk of wheat held inside a circle of gold thread. Nora saw it almost every day. That morning, she left the loaf with the woman at the desk, exchanged a greeting, and hurried back to load the Rinaldi order. She did not know that the same emblem was folded inside a blanket at the mansion. By late afternoon, a storm had slowed traffic, and one of Nora's employees had gone home sick. She drove the delivery herself. Rain shone on the iron gates of the Rinaldi estate, while guards inspected each basket as though a dinner roll might conceal a weapon. Nora kept both hands on the steering wheel. Her right thumb folded and unfolded the edge of the paper delivery slip. Inside, a housekeeper hurried her through the marble foyer. Before Nora could set down the final basket, a baby's cry cut through the ceiling above them. It was not a single sharp cry. It came in waves, stopping only long enough for the child to drag in another breath. 2 employees rushed upstairs while a third came down carrying a bottle warmer. Nora looked toward the staircase. How long has he been crying? The housekeeper glanced around before answering. Since early afternoon. And how many people have held him? Everyone who knows how. That answer bothered Nora more than the crying. Years before, when Nora's sister needed treatment after giving birth, Nora cared for her infant nephew. She learned from nurses, kept notes, and discovered how quickly a frightened adult could frighten a tired baby. Changing the plan every 30 seconds could become part of the problem. Upstairs, a door opened and Matteo's voice struck the hallway. Call someone else. The physician soon told Celeste there was no acute emergency. Milo needed observation, calm surroundings, and follow-up if anything changed. Celeste ordered another caregiver. Nora watched a young woman enter the nursery carrying Milo, then return less than a minute later with the baby still crying. Another employee reached for him before the first had even stopped moving. Wait, Nora said. Everyone looked at her. She wished immediately that she had stayed silent. Her thumb crushed the corner of the delivery slip. Matteo stepped into the hall. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, and composed in the way of men accustomed to being obeyed. Only his uneven breathing betrayed him. Who are you? Nora Whitaker. I brought the bakery order. Then why are you upstairs? The sensible answer was an apology. Nora pictured the broken oven and 3 payroll envelopes. Milo cried again. Because every person who walks into that room changes something, she said. The light, the blanket, the way he's held, the sound they make. Has anyone stayed with him the same way for more than 10 minutes? Celeste's expression hardened. My grandson is not a loaf of bread. No. Nora answered too quickly. Bred's more patience in my kitchen. Silence followed. Nora closed her eyes for half a second. That had been the wrong thing to say to the family paying most of her bills. Then Milo's cry broke into a weak, exhausted rasp. Matteo looked toward the nursery. What would you do? Make the room quieter. Stop passing him around. Hold him in one steady position unless he shows us that it's uncomfortable. Are you a nurse? No. And I'm not claiming to treat anything. I helped care for my nephew when his mother was recovering. Your physician has already told you what needs medical attention. I'm telling you what this room looks like to someone who has had to calm an overtired baby. Matteo studied her for a moment. Then he stepped aside. You have 10 minutes. Lamps glowed in every corner of the nursery. A music box played beneath the crying. 2 phones vibrated, and 4 adults crowded the crib. Nora turned off the music box. She lowered the nearest lamp and asked the housekeeper to leave one warm light on. Then she requested that everyone except Matteo step into the hall. Celeste did not move. Mother, Matteo said. She left without looking at Nora. Matteo lifted Milo from the crib. The baby arched against him and cried harder. Matteo tightened his hold, changed arms, then bounced him quickly. Give him to me, Nora said. The order came out sharper than she intended. Matteo's eyes cooled. I mean, if you want me to try. He passed Milo over. The crying did not stop. For the first minute, it became worse. Matteo moved closer and told Nora to raise the baby's head. She adjusted slightly. He told her Milo preferred movement. She took one slow step. When he reached to change the blanket, Nora almost gave the child back. If you know exactly what he needs, she said, her voice strained, then why did you ask me? Matteo went still. Nora regretted the words, but there was no soft way to retrieve them. Milo's cheek had turned against her flour-dusted sleeve. She steadied her breathing and kept the same gentle sway. I can't help him while everyone in this room is trying to win against his crying, she said. He isn't challenging you. Matteo stared at his son. Then, without speaking, he walked to the door and told the waiting staff to move farther down the hall. He silenced both phones on the table. The room finally became quiet enough to hear rain tapping the windows. Nora did not bounce faster when Milo cried. She did not introduce another song or shift him from shoulder to shoulder. She held him upright against her chest, supported him carefully, and hummed the same plain line again and again. 5 minutes passed. Milo's cries weakened into small protests. His fingers remained tangled in Nora's apron, but his back softened. After several more minutes, one fist opened, then the other. Matteo watched as though someone had altered the laws of his house. "He's asleep," he whispered. Nora kept swaying. "He's exhausted." No one else could do that. No one else was allowed to finish what they started. Matteo looked toward the empty hall. "What did you give him?" Nora's head snapped up. "Nothing." The suspicion in his question stung more than it should have. She could smell orange glaze and warm cardamom on her sleeve, where Milo's face rested. But scent was not an answer, and she would not pretend it was. "You lowered the stimulation and stopped changing hands. I stayed calm long enough for him to borrow that calm. If you're worried about his health, ask the physician, not me." Matteo's expression loosened, though only slightly. "Then stay. I'll pay whatever you want. I own a bakery. You also appear to be the only person my son trusts." Nora looked down at Milo. "He doesn't trust me. He experienced one quiet stretch in a very loud day. Then give him another tomorrow. And the day after that? What happens when I go back to my life?" Matteo had no answer. Nora shifted the sleeping baby toward him, but Matteo's hands hesitated. His fingers moved automatically to one silver cuff link. "He cannot learn you'll stay," she said quietly. "If you keep hiring someone else to stay for you." Matteo accepted his son. Milo stirred but did not wake. For several seconds, father and child remained still. Then the blanket slipped from Matteo's forearm. Nora saw the emblem. A blue stalk of wheat, a circle of gold thread. The same mark above the blue door she visited every morning. "Where did you get that blanket?" she asked. Matteo's attention sharpened. "It has been here since Milo was born." "Was it Isabel's?" He took one step toward her. "You know my wife's name?" "The housekeeper said it downstairs." "You recognized that symbol." Nora could have lied. The Rinaldi contract could repair her oven and protect her employees. While Willow Hearth depended on privacy, she had no right to confirm that any woman had stayed there. "I recognize the organization," she said. "Not your wife." "What organization?" Milo moved against Matteo's chest. Nora lowered her voice. "Willow Hearth. I bring them bread every morning. What kind of place is it? A place for women who need time and safety. That is all I can tell you." Matteo's face changed at the word safety. Nora expected another question, perhaps an order. Instead, Milo made a small sound, and Matteo looked down before he looked back at her. That pause was the first thing Nora trusted about him. She returned the next evening under a 1-week agreement. The physician approved a calm, consistent environment. Nora's role was only to help the adults follow through. Milo began crying as soon as he was placed in his father's arms. Matteo adjusted him once, then twice. His fingers drifted toward his cuff links. "Sit down," Nora said from the other side of the room. "He wants you. He wants the crying to stop feeling like an emergency." "That sounds convenient. So does handing him back." Matteo gave her a look that had probably ended conversations across the city. Nora folded an empty bread bag beneath her thumb, but did not move. He sat. Milo continued crying. Nora guided Matteo to keep his voice low and repeat something simple. Matteo claimed he knew no lullabies. "Read anything," she said. The only object within reach was the paper band from a loaf Nora had brought. Matteo began reading the ingredients as if presenting financial evidence. Flour, water, orange peel, cardamom, salt. Slower. He tried again. Milo did not fall asleep, but between orange peel and cardamom, the crying stopped for 4 full seconds. Matteo looked at Nora. "Keep going," she whispered. The next night, he arrived early. Over the following days, progress came in pieces too small for anyone outside the nursery to notice. Matteo learned which bottle Milo accepted in the evening. He stopped entering with 2 ringing phones. Milo began turning his head toward the low sound of his father's voice, even when Nora stood closer. Once a capo called during feeding time and demanded an immediate decision about a disputed warehouse. Matteo listened for 10 seconds, watched Milo's fingers close around his shirt, and said, "You can wait 20 minutes." Nora smiled before she could stop herself. Matteo noticed, and for the first time, the hard line of his mouth softened. Celeste noticed too. She began appearing in the nursery doorway without entering. She never openly interfered, but the following morning, Nora found a new caregiver waiting beside the crib. Matteo sent the woman home with full pay. "One routine," he said. Nora nodded. "One routine." On the fifth evening, she examined the blanket again. The emblem was not merely embroidered onto it. A narrow gold circle had been stitched through a reinforced square at the corner. The same method Willow Hearth used for families who asked the refuge to receive and forward correspondence without revealing their location. Nora had seen those blankets stacked near the front desk while delivering bread. She had never asked who received them. "There may have been letters," she told Matteo. He turned from the crib. "From Isabel?" "I don't know. The mark means someone requested protected forwarding. Willow Hearth won't give you an address, and they shouldn't, but if a letter was written to you, they may be able to confirm how it was delivered." Matteo reached for his phone. Nora put out a hand. "Do not send armed men to their door." His eyes dropped to her hand, then rose again. "You are very comfortable telling me what not to do." "No, I'm terrified. I'm doing it anyway." He looked at the crushed paper edge beneath her thumb and slowly set the phone back down. Later, Nora explained that her sister Rachel had needed treatment after her son was born. Nora moved in, ran the bakery before dawn, and spent afternoons measuring bottles and recording sleep times. "For 6 weeks, he fell asleep on me every day," she said. "Then Rachel got better. A year later, they moved to Oregon." "And you let them?" Nora gave him a tired smile. "She was his mother. Loving him didn't give me ownership." The answer unsettled Matteo. He stood beside the window, looking down at the men posted along his walls. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Isabel said this house never slept. There was always a car arriving, a door closing, someone waiting for my attention. She asked me to move meetings elsewhere after Milo was born." "Did you?" "I doubled the guards." Nora did not answer. "I thought protection was the answer." "It was your answer." Matteo glanced at the crib. The week before she left, someone followed her car. She took Milo to a place she would not name. She returned with him the next morning and refused to explain where she had been. I called it reckless. Nora looked at the blanket. Willow Hearth had not been Isabel's escape after she disappeared. It had been the place she tested before leaving. "She came back once," Nora said. "Maybe she wanted to know whether you could make it possible for her to stay." Matteo's hand rose toward his cufflink, then stopped halfway. "I told her no one could touch this family while I was alive. That isn't the same as being here when your family is afraid." The nursery door opened. Celeste stood on the threshold. Her face was pale, but her voice remained controlled. "Enough." She closed the door. "You have delivered your bread, Miss Whitaker. You have also exceeded every boundary of your employment." Nora rose. "Matteo asked me a question. My son is grieving, which makes him vulnerable to suggestions." Celeste looked at the blanket. "You recognized a private symbol, encouraged him to distrust his household, and now you are repeating Isabel's complaints as if you knew her. I never met Isabel. That is difficult to believe." Matteo stepped between them. "Mother, what do you know about Willow Hearth?" Celeste ignored the question. "The council meets tomorrow. If word spreads that your wife hid in a refuge and a baker is directing decisions inside your nursery, every man at that table will smell weakness. This is about Milo. Everything is about Milo. He is your heir." The words landed like a door locking. Nora looked at the sleeping baby, then at Matteo. She waited for him to say that Milo was more than an heir. She waited for him to tell Celeste that Nora had earned the right to speak. Matteo said nothing. His silence lasted only a few seconds, but Nora understood it. The council had entered the nursery without a single capo crossing the threshold. Celeste turned to her. "The bakery contract is terminated. You will be paid through the end of the month." Nora's thumb found the edge of the paper bag on the table. She folded it once, hard enough to split the seam. 3 employees. A broken oven. Wages due on Friday. "Keep the payment," she said. "We delivered what you ordered." She placed her temporary key beside Matteo's phone. At the door, she stopped without turning around. "Your son doesn't need me to replace his mother. He needs his father to stop disappearing whenever being a father makes him feel powerless." Then she left. Milo woke less than an hour later. His cry brought two caregivers running, but Matteo sent them away. Celeste told him he had an early council meeting. He closed the nursery door in her face. For 40 minutes, nothing worked. Milo cried, rested, then cried again. Matteo's shirt grew damp beneath the baby's cheek. Twice, his hand reached toward the call button. Twice, he lowered it. "I don't know what you need," he admitted, "but I'm here." He read the ingredients from the bread band again. His voice cracked over cardamom. Milo did not sleep, but one small hand closed around Matteo's finger. Near midnight, Matteo searched for another blanket. In the bottom drawer, beneath neatly folded linens, he found a bundle of envelopes tied with burgundy ribbon. Celeste saved family correspondence by date. Birthday cards, condolence notes, invitations, even angry letters from relatives she had cut off years ago. There was a gap covering the week Isabel disappeared. Matteo carried the bundle downstairs with Milo against his shoulder. Celeste sat alone in the library, already dressed for the following day. "Where is her letter?" he asked. Celeste looked at the ribbon in his hand. For once, she had no prepared expression. "You knew," Matteo said. "I knew she was frightened. Where is the letter?" Celeste opened a locked compartment in her desk and removed one envelope. The blue and gold wheat emblem was pressed into its corner. "It arrived through the estate mail 2 days after she left," Celeste said. "I believed silence would bring her back sooner." Matteo opened it with one hand. Isabel had not asked him to search. After her car was followed, she had taken Milo to Willow Hearth for one night, then returned because hiding with an infant was no life. She still believed Matteo could change their home. She asked him to move organizational business elsewhere, reduce the armed traffic, and spend one uninterrupted hour with Milo daily. If he did, she would contact him when she felt safe enough to talk. At the bottom, she had written one final line. "Do not prove you can find me. Prove you can stay with him." Matteo read it twice. Why? His voice barely carried across the library. Celeste looked older than she had that morning. "Your father stopped sleeping after your brother died. Men who had served him for 20 years used his grief to divide his territory. I watched love destroy his authority. So you decided my wife was expendable. I decided you could not appear to be governed by fear." Milo shifted against Matteo's chest. He had finally fallen asleep during the confession. "I was governed by fear," Matteo said. "I simply called it control." Celeste reached for her grandson, perhaps from habit, perhaps from regret. Matteo stepped back. "Tomorrow, you will tell me which letters you stopped and who helped you. Then you will leave decisions about Milo to his parents. The council will see this as weakness. Then they can learn what it looks like." The council gathered the next morning. After 12 minutes of arguments about warehouses, routes, and succession, a message appeared on Matteo's phone. Milo was awake. Matteo stood. "We are not finished," one capo said. "You are. From today, no council business will be conducted here. No armed meeting, unscheduled convoy, or man waiting beneath my son's window for an order." The room went silent. Matteo placed Isabel's letter before Celeste as a boundary neither could deny. "My family is not evidence against my authority," he said. "Anyone who believes otherwise can say it before I leave." No one did. Matteo walked upstairs. That afternoon, he replied through Willow Hearth without demands or a tracking device. He listed the meetings removed from the house, the limits on staff changes, and his hours with Milo. She could answer when she chose. Only after the letter was delivered did he go to Nora's bakery. The oven had failed again. An employee scraped dark crust from a tray while Nora calculated what could still be sold. When Matteo entered, every conversation stopped. He came alone. Nora's hand moved toward a paper bag, but she caught herself. "If you're here about Willow Hearth, I won't give you anyone's address. I know." He placed a contract on the counter. It restored the order and advanced the cost of repairs against future deliveries, with no claim on her business. "I am not buying your silence," he said. "There is a clause confirming that." Nora read it carefully. "And what are you buying?" "Bread." Despite herself, she laughed. Matteo did not ask her to become Milo's nanny. He asked her to document one routine every caregiver, including him, had to follow. Nora added one condition. Disagreement could never cost her the bakery contract. "Agreed," he said. "Put it in writing." He did. That evening, Nora returned to the mansion carrying orange cardamom bread. The nursery was quieter. 2 lamps had been removed, the staff schedule had been simplified, and Matteo entered without an escort. Milo began to cry when he lifted him. Matteo's jaw tightened. His hand moved toward his cuff link. But there were no cuffs beneath the sleeves of his plain white shirt. He removed his phone and the heavy silver ring that marked his position in the family. Both objects went onto a table outside the nursery door. Then he closed the door from the inside. Nora remained in the hallway. Minutes passed. Milo cried. Matteo read the same ingredients in the same low rhythm. His pacing stayed slow, even when the sound rose. He did not call Nora. He did not call a caregiver. "Don't fix the crying," Nora said softly through the door. "Stay through it." Matteo stopped pacing and held his son close. The crying weakened. One small fist opened against his shirt. Milo's head settled beneath Matteo's chin. When the door finally opened, Nora expected him to hand the baby over. He did not. Milo was asleep in his father's arms. 3 months later, the bell above Nora's bakery door rang shortly after sunrise. The repaired oven glowed evenly along the back wall, and the day's first orange cardamom loaf waited beside the register for Willow Hearth. Matteo entered with Milo awake in a soft carrier against his chest. There were no guards inside, no phone in his hand, and no panic when Milo made a tired sound. "Long night?" Nora asked. He wanted to discuss flour at 2 in the morning. She smiled and reached toward the carrier. Milo looked at her, then rested his cheek against Matteo instead. Neither adult tried to move him. Matteo took an envelope from his coat. The blue and gold wheat emblem marked one corner. Isabel had answered. Her message was brief. She had heard about the changes from Willow Hearth. She was not ready to return, but she was ready to speak with Matteo and see Milo in a protected place the following week. Nora handed the letter back. "How do you feel?" Matteo looked down at his sleeping son. Once, he would have answered with a plan. Now he allowed the question to remain unanswered for a while. "Afraid," he said at last. "But I'll be there." Behind the counter, the oven timer rang. The warm scent of orange and cardamom filled the room. Nora wrapped the first loaf for Willow Hearth, while Matteo stood beside her, carrying the child he had once begged someone else to hold. If this story touched you, tell us what staying for someone has meant in your life. Subscribe for more stories about power, learning how to care.